right, folks. Good evening. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. We're going to get going because we've got a lot of things to cover this evening. My name is Terry Eichel. I'm the Executive Director for the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network. We are a faith-based environmental organization in Connecticut, and we work with religious communities on environmental issues like climate change, toxic pollution, and biodiversity loss. Tonight we're doing environmental legislation in Connecticut. The legislative session started in early January. It goes until early June, and things are moving quite quickly. So we're going to cover a lot of different topics. I want to thank all of my speakers for joining me this evening. This was initially scheduled for this coming Tuesday, the 18th, but there are a couple really important public hearings this week. And if we'd kept it on Tuesday night, then you would not have had an opportunity necessarily to submit testimony or sign up to speak. And I wanted you to be able to do that. But I'm very grateful for all my allies for being able to join me on holiday weekend. So that's amazing. So this past week, we have seen the firing of hundreds of thousands of career civil servants and the ending of policies that educate the public, promote equal opportunity, and keep us safe. It is clear that state action more than ever is critical. So we're going to talk about legislation that is up this session. And I'm joined by Amy Patterson from the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, Louise Washer from the Norwalk Rivershed Coalition, Lori Brown from Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, Sam Danowski from the Sierra Club, and Kim Stoner from Connecticut Northeast Organic Farming Association. I also want to highlight IREJN has an I Care About Climate and Creation postcard campaign going. We're asking houses of worship to sign up. Each person is asked to send 3 postcards, one to the governor, one to their state rep, one to their state senator. And we are focusing on the state. This is a state-based thing, not a federal. When you sign up, let me know how many postcards you need. I will send you the postcards, the postcard stamps, and some suggested messaging to get you started. Right now, we're keeping it fairly broad because the bills are all still in committee. And right now, I've sent out over 2,600 postcards to houses of worship to send off to the governor and their legislators. So please join me in doing this great project and letting them know that we really care about this. So after all these presentations, I am going to, we'll do a moderated Q&A. We'll take questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A or the chat. Let me make sure that both of them are open. But I'm going to turn this over now to Louise, who is going to talk about the neonicotinoid legislation that is having its public hearing on Wednesday. Louise, take it away.
Thank you, Terry. I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides that I'm going to fly through, hopefully pretty quickly, because I know we have a lot to do tonight. I don't know how familiar people are with this word neonicotinoid. We've been working for a few years in Connecticut to raise awareness about this issue and to pass some legislation to restrict neonicotinoids. Just like as a brief recap, if you're not familiar, neonics, for short, neonics, introduced in the 1990s. They're the most widely used insecticides in the world, and they are really most known, most notorious or infamous for their links to sharp declines in bees and other insect populations. Recently, study came out that they're a key part of the declines in monarch butterflies, toxic to birds directly, even in really small quantities, and indirectly, because most birds, 96% of birds rely on insects to survive, so they need insects. One of the things we're trying to do in this bill is to ban some of the seeds, agricultural seeds like corn seeds that have a coating of neonics on them. And studies have showed, the American Bird Conservancy study showed one of those seeds is enough to kill a songbird. The EPA showed over 200 threatened and endangered species are jeopardized, literally being pushed towards extinction by neonics. And they are very water soluble, and they travel easily from where they're supposed to be through soil and into water, where they are very toxic to aquatic insects. So this is some of the information that we do have about where neonics are showing up in the environment in Connecticut. We know that more than half our rivers tested by the US Geological Survey do show having neonics in them. So the Norwalk River is one that has been sort of a case study, and we have data from 25 years for the Norwalk River, and you can see uh, three guys a professor, a postdoc, and a head of the lab for, I think it's the Center for Environmental Science and Engineering at the University of Connecticut, just pulled together the data that we have from USGS, from another study, and from DEEP to look at what's happening in our rivers with regard to these neonics. So you can see this graph on the right is from that study, and you can just see in the Norwalk River the rising levels of neonics over the years. And the thing is, like, of 218 pesticides they looked at, one is there at levels that exceed the EPA benchmark for aquatic life. They also, not as much testing was done, but the USGS did find neonics in our groundwater. So that's concerning for human health issues. Neonics more and more studies are coming out showing the effects to human health, harms to heart and brain development in prenatally exposed children. So that's another part of this whole story. We mostly hear about the effects on bees, but this is a broader issue, all wildlife and human health. And the reason is that they're so toxic. I mean, EPA famously called them exquisitely toxic to insects. Just this grain of salt sized amount, can kill 150,000 bees. So it's hard to even believe how good they are at their job of killing insects. And they've made agriculture, 48 times more harmful to insects since they came out in the 1990s. So why do we need state action now? One of the reasons is, and one of the arguments you'll hear against the bill, probably on Wednesday when we have a public hearing, is that this is the job of the EPA or of the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. But the EPA has said that they lack sufficient resources to address, the known harmful impacts of neonics in a timely manner. We know they complete about 5% of their annual registration reviews as it is. But two of the reasons that I want to highlight tonight, because our bill addresses this, is that the EPA, well, on the federal level, we exempt seed coatings from our pesticide regulations. So a registered pesticide that's regulated, when used, when it's put on a seed, it's no longer considered something that needs to be regulated. So that's a loophole that that our bill would try to take one step towards addressing. That's just a huge release of pesticides in an unregulated way into the environment. And EPA's insecticide strategy doesn't address non-agricultural uses, such as like neonics on turf grass and ornamentals and golf courses, which is a substantial contributor in Connecticut. The solution is to join what is now becoming like a regional movement to reduce some of the wasteful uses of neonics. So we want in Connecticut to follow the lead of New York, Vermont, New Jersey, Maine, Quebec, Ontario. These are all places that have taken steps to really reduce some of these kind of wasteful prophylactic uses, some obsolete and ineffective uses. We look forward someday to maybe following in Europe's footsteps. They have banned all outdoor uses of neonics. So what this bill and what the New York bill did and what Vermont has done and what we're trying to do is look at some high harm, low benefit uses of neonics. So aesthetic uses on lawns, golf courses, ornamental landscaping. Those are going to be part of the bill, that we would limit those, that we would restrict those. The Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station, one of the scientists from there was actually part of a study that showed neonics no longer effective at grub control, which is one of the uses that's contributing to probably what's in our rivers, contributing to the environment. The grubs are becoming resistant to neonics. And then the other low-hanging fruit, low benefit use, we know about from a landmark study that landmark report that Cornell put together in 2020, where they looked at 400 studies that included 5,000 side-by-side field tests of the seeds with the neonics coating on them and seeds without. And what they found was neonics were consistently increasing yields and benefiting farmers for some uses, including fruit and vegetables. But for these row crops, corn, soybean, and wheat, we really saw that 87 to 93% of the field trials, no increase in yields, or there was a decrease in yields. So farmers are paying for this pesticide that is, not working for them and is harming the pollinators that they rely on their farms to pollinate their crops. So what we have is a strong bill that is very much is worded very similar to the New York Birds and Bees Protection Act that passed 2 years ago. And it does just what I was just talking about. It restricts turf grass, lawns, golf courses, playing fields, outdoor ornamental plants, shrubs and trees, garden plants. And it includes a couple of other things, but the main thing, and then this part 2 of it is those row crops, corn, soybean, and wheat. So we would be doing what other states have done. This would not go into effect until 2029. And one of the arguments you definitely hear on Wednesday is landscapers and farmers maybe saying, please we don't want to have restrictions on any pesticides because we don't want to take any tools out of our toolbox. But the thing is, this bill provides DEEP the power to grant exemptions if there's, say, an invasive pest or woolly adelgid on our hemlocks. They can just, there's a place in there for them to just have a waiver to exempt that use. Same thing for the row crops seeds. If a farmer has a pest that is, really needs to use the neonics on, will be a process for them to ask to use that. And same thing in New York, same thing in Quebec. So modeled right after that. So we have a public hearing on Wednesday. HB 6916 is the neonics bill. Really encourage people, if you're interested in knowing more about this, you can find out more. You can read the talking points for testimony at ctpesticidereform.org, or you can email me. Terry has my email. But please consider, submitting written testimony. Just saying, it can be quick. It can be 2 sentences. This is why this matters to me, whether it's the butterflies or the birds that you're worried about, or, our drinking water. I just encourage you to, let our legislators know you care about this issue. And we are having a lobby day hosted by the Sierra Club that morning at 11. So if you're going to be nearby, you should come by and see us. And that's it. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you so much, Louise. And so, yes, public hearing for this bill is up on Wednesday at 12 p.m., I believe. Is this
the public hearing starts at 12
The
p.m.
deadline to submit testimony, I believe, is usually 3 p.m. the day before.
I think that's
like that.
advised, yeah.
And the deadline to sign up is also at that time, 3 p.m. the day before. So please take action. So I'm actually going to go to Ann Hulick now because she has a bill on the same public hearing on Wednesday on PFAS. So Ann.
Thank you, Terry. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. I apologize. I did not have slides, but I thought I would take a couple minutes just to talk about Senate Bill 887, which is an act exempting certain cookware from PFAS requirements. And just to give you a little bit of background, last year, after many years of hard work with all of you, we passed a significant law to restrict consumer products that contain PFAS, which are a class of chemicals that are extraordinarily harmful to our environment and to public health. And these are chemicals that there's 15,000 different variations of these chemicals. They have been found now all over the globe. They are found in our water, our soil, our wildlife, mammals up in the Arctic and Antarctic, and in 99% of our bodies. They are linked to multiple cancers, reproductive disorders, immunosuppression, and a host of other diseases. And the concern about this class of chemicals is that they are all the different variations of these chemicals have a fluorine and carbon bond, which is an organic synthetic bond that is virtually indestructible. And those chemicals have been used in a variety of products because they're very useful. They provide properties that are anti-stain, anti-stick, fire resistant, and so they're used in so many different products. And last year, Connecticut was among a few states that took a national position to restrict these chemicals in consumer products where there were other alternatives already in commerce. So not impacting business, not impacting commerce in any way, just protecting our environment and our public health. And in that law that was passed last year, there was a phased-in approach so that many of these consumer products won't be banned until a couple of years out in order to give industry additional time to innovate and shift to PFAS-free products. So last year, in 2024, after many states, including Connecticut, passed these laws, a new cookware sustainability alliance formed. And these are a group of cookware manufacturers and lobbyists that form to beat back these laws and carve out nonstick cookware from state laws. And they are here in Connecticut. They have hired many, many lobbying firms, and they're working extremely hard to carve out cookware from our 2024 PFAS law, which would honestly be a travesty. So we are asking folks on this meeting tonight and any of your colleagues to help us hold strong to maintain our 2024 law that protected public health and our environment from PFAS chemicals, and to oppose Senate Bill 887 and make a strong argument that these variations of PFAS chemicals are not safe for our environment or for human health, that they still contribute to contamination to our water, to our soil, to wildlife, to our fish. And these new chemicals are still harmful when used. We know that nonstick cookware has even been reported to harm and be lethal to birds if they're used in your home. So we have a lot of talking points to address this. It's very unfortunate that we have to fight back to protect our environment from the chemical industry and the cookware industry that wants to just maintain their profits. We are not alone. This cookware alliance is in Maine and Michigan and Minnesota and other states trying to do the same thing. But it would really be a travesty to have this carve out to our law that was passed in 2024 with unanimous support in both chambers. So Senate Bill 887, we're asking all of you to just write short comments to oppose that law. I mean, to oppose the bill, excuse me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Anne. That was great. So I'm
Thank
going
you,
to now,
Carrie.
we'll do questions, and people are like sort of chatting in the chat, and obviously if they have questions in the Q&A, you can put them there. I'm going to go to Kim Stoner, who is going to talk about the Environmental Rights Amendment. The Environmental Rights Amendment already had its public hearing. I think there's a lot of support for it. So Kim's going to give you an update on what the ERA exactly is and what is next in the process.
Okay, thank you very much, Terry. So I'm Kim Stoner. I am the Director of Advocacy for Connecticut NOFA, the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Connecticut, and I'm the coordinator for this state for the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment Alliance. So the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment, you've heard a lot of very specific information about specific chemicals. This is taking a big step upwards, I would say, in being a very broad umbrella. So the idea is to put into our state constitution the fundamental human right to clean and healthy air, water, soil, ecosystems, and environment, and a safe and stable climate. So this would also explicitly protect those rights across a whole bunch of different aspects of society. So race, ethnicity, tribal membership, socioeconomic status, gender and geography. I think I've got the whole list. And then it would also call on the state, and the state actually includes local governments as well as the state government, to conserve and protect the natural resources for the benefit of the people of Connecticut now and for future generations. So, so it's big, and it's a big job to get it passed as well. It requires to pass a constitutional amendment. If we were to get 75% of the vote in both houses, it would go on the ballot. So this is actually what's in the legislature right now is a resolution to put it on the ballot. So if it were to pass both houses with 75% of the vote, it would go on the ballot for a referendum of the people, like the other recent referendums that we've had on early voting and no excuse absentee ballots. It would go on there in 2026. If it were to pass with just a majority in both houses, then we would need, after the 2026 election, to do the whole thing again and pass it again, and then it would go on the ballot for a referendum of the people. So it's a big job to put something into the state constitution, easier than the federal constitution. So we're part of a national movement to put these green amendments, they're called, into state constitutions across the country. 3 states are considered to already have them: Pennsylvania, Montana, and more recently, New York. But one of the things about a constitutional amendment is it's a big job to put it in there, but once it's in there for the long term. So you may have heard about a case in Montana that happened where young people sued the state of Montana to establish their right to a livable climate, and to overturn a law in Montana that would have exempted fossil fuel installations from having to be evaluated on the basis of their effect on climate. And the young people in Montana won that case. and have actually also won on appeal. So to the Montana Supreme Court. So they've completely won. So now they're going to negotiate with the state about how the state now has to respect their right to a livable climate. But that's on the basis of a constitutional provision that passed in Montana in 1972. So once you put this into the Constitution, it's there for the long term. And so I think that's really important at this moment, as Terry mentioned at the beginning, where all kinds of things that we thought were permanent, the clean, clean air, clean water, environmental justice, all kinds of funding for climate are being overturned at the federal level. So it's important to do these things at the state level and to do them in a way that is not easily undone if we have different people come and go in the state government. So the resolution is SJ 36. And as I said, it's a resolution to put the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment on the ballot. And where we are right now, as Terry mentioned, we have had a public hearing. There was a public hearing Friday, a little more than a week ago, on Friday, in the Government Administration and Elections Committee. That's the committee that deals with constitutional amendments. We got a lot of support. We had 250 people and organizations that submitted supportive written testimony. We had lots of people also testify orally. And so where we are right now is we are awaiting a vote in the Government Administration Elections Committee. At this point, the most useful thing that you can do would be to ask your legislators to co-sponsor this, this resolution. And at the last minute before signing up to do this, I created an Action Network page for you to do that. So I will paste that into the chat. And and it's very brief. Well, the link is long, but the statement is pretty brief. It's just like asking your legislators to co-sponsor the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment. And there are a few paragraphs about what it does. I would encourage you and the people in your communities to write about how this affects you, what kinds of pollution you have had to deal with, your concerns about climate change, and ask your legislators to sign up. We have about 11 legislators who have signed up so far as co-sponsors. And then the other place where you can get more information is our website, which is ct-era.org. And I'll put that in the chat as well. Whoops, there should be a G on the end of that, era.org. I think that's the basic message. I did want to say that I got started doing this from my Quaker meeting. I actually, since this is IREJN, I originally heard about this from a Quaker regional eco-justice group. I heard about it from a woman in Maine who was working on the Pine Tree Amendment. So, there is definitely a faith community connection.
Awesome. Kim, thank you so much. And actually, Stephanie, there's someone just said in the chat, since there's so many bills that need our support, can someone make a list of all the bills, the dates and the timings and all that sort of thing? I put in the chat, IREJN does have a watch list going. And I think all of the bills that we've talked about so far are on it. I've been trying to add it sort of as fast as I can. And it has like, this is the next, sort of gives a little brief thing about what the bill is, and then says, here's the next action, here's what's happening next. You can submit your testimony and register to speak and that sort of thing. So, but the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters also has a very active and extensive watch list. I did include briefing papers on my page wherever I could find them, so you could kind of like call some talking points from there. So anyway, I will also, I want to talk about two bills, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lori. But there are two bills that I've been following. One is the bill to, hang on a second, let me get the actual name. A bill concerning funding for the Residential Energy Preparation Services Program. So this is a program that helps low-income residents access the energy efficiency program by removing barriers to participation. And when I say barriers to participation, very high percentage of our most vulnerable population live in homes, apartments and houses that have mold, asbestos, lead, that sort of thing. And if an energy efficiency vendor comes in and sees that, they can't actually do the work. So they have to leave and they can't do the extensive work that needs to be done. So our most vulnerable, our poorest, usually extremely low income individuals are left living in housing that not only has significant health hazards, but it's also extremely wasteful energy efficiency wise. And so they also have a much higher energy burden than their sort of more wealthy counterparts. And so 2 years ago, a pilot program was created called the Residential Energy Preparation Services Program. And when those homes were identified as having a barrier, they were put into this program, the barrier was removed, and then they were put back into the income eligible energy efficiency program. This was funded with ARPA money at that point. It's $10 million. And it's been a very successful program, but it's now out of money. And so this bill would add $8 million to this program. I understand, ARPA money was one-time money. It's not ongoing money. And obviously we're facing a difficult situation with potential shortfalls from the federal government. So the state government may need to fill in gaps that didn't exist, a year or two ago. So I understand that this bill is a harder bill, but it's also super important. And that is why I am going to submit testimony and speak on it. It is coming up for a public hearing on Tuesday in the Energy and Technology Committee. Dollar for dollar, it provides a tremendous return on investment. Just from a financial standpoint, it provides a tremendous return on investment, but it's also the morally right thing to do and helps some of the people that are struggling the most address these health hazards and energy inefficiency. So that bill is HB 6926. And again, I will send out this information in my follow-up. And the other bill I wanted to highlight was HB 6915, an act concerning the use of rodenticides, second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. These are rat poisons that cause essentially internal bleeding, and they cause tremendous pain and suffering to any animal that consumes them or consumes the animal that consumed them. So not only do they kill the rats, they also kill hawks, eagles, raptors, foxes, coyotes. Anything that eats the dead rat will die the same death. Even a pet can die if they're not brought to the vet quickly enough. Usually people obviously notice that their pets are struggling or something and they'll bring them to the vet. And usually they can be saved, but these rodenticides are so toxic and that doesn't always happen. And they obviously they pose a threat to children as well because they're in our general environment. So this bill would ban the use for rodenticides from just, I think, residential use. I think there are still, it would be accessible to, certified pesticide people, but just for regular use, you should not be able to go out and buy them at Lowe's or Home Depot and whatnot. So that is HB 6915. We are supporting that bill as well. Again, this is, the other things, they're not actually particularly effective. They cause a massive die-off in the rat population when they're introduced, but then there's actually a huge rebound in birth rate. And so you end up with the same, if not more rats than you started with. The only thing that's actually really successful at removing them is removing their food sources and blocking their entrances. So that's actually what works to control rats. These rodenticides are not very effective either. And again, they're such a huge threat to our our overall wildlife that I know we all really, care about. So that bill is up for an hearing on Wednesday, along with the neonic bill and the PFAS bill. The rodenticides bill is Wednesday. So now, and again, I will send out this list to my list to you guys after this, along with a recording. Now I'm gonna hopefully Lori Brown is with us. Yes, she is. All right, great. When I mentioned the firing of civil servants, we've really seen in the news how important good civil servants are in advancing strong progressive policies that protects people. And so Lori is going to talk about the reappointment of Marissa Gillette, the reappointment nomination of Marissa Gillette to the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, I mean, really, if you care about clean energy, climate, and your electric bill, you're really going to want to send a strong message to the members of the Executive and Legislative Nominations Committee this week. And, it took me forever to understand what PURA was. It's so far, it seems so technical and so far away with dockets and whatnot. But it turns out that, PURA is a hugely important role in terms of protecting ratepayers, consumers, and they are the only watchdog and regulator of all of the electric utilities. So what's happened is that the electric utilities, Eversource and Avangrid, are escalating their campaign of real intimidation and misinformation in an attempt to weaken the Public Regulatory Authority, PURA. And they've filed a frivolous lawsuit against PURA. They've conducted a vicious smear campaign against PURA chair Melissa Gillette, personally, attacking her, and spent millions of dollars in lobbying, all to derail the regulatory efforts that finally hold them accountable. So a vote is coming up this Thursday. It's a little bit different than legislation. This is all about renominating Marissa Gillette as chair of PURA. And like I said, the vote is coming up this Thursday to confirm her renomination. And it's imperative that she be renominated because PURA exists really to protect ratepayers, ensure fair utility rates, and advance the state's environmental and public health goals within her jurisdiction. So Marissa has been nationally recognized force as an effective regulator. And she's worked hard to uphold the law on behalf of the public as the legislature, exactly as the legislature has directed her to do. And part of the smear campaign is that she's just making all these decisions on her own, that she's biased. And there was a real hit job by the Hartford Courant to expose like a tax. They call it expose. There's nothing that she did wrong. And so Marissa Gillette really has done an amazing job. She is there to implement the laws that get passed that hold the utilities accountable. So that includes, I don't know if you remember a few years ago after the storms when Eversource really messed up, and were performing terribly. They had cut a lot of staff, and their net profits, shareholder profits are, phenomenally, crippling. And they're cutting back on all of the things. And that really just tipped it over the edge where they passed at the legislature the Take Back Our Grid Act. So part of the things that she has to do is to implement those laws. And part of that means stopping utilities from passing along really inappropriate expenses that are for lobbying, corporate perks, all the things that they're trying to pass on to the consumer as part of your rates. So the problem right now is that there are three Democrats. It's all political. There are three Democrats on the Legislative and Executive Nominations Committee that's meeting this Thursday that are, truth be told, they're planning to vote against her. If that happens, and if all the Republicans vote no, as if it seems like they will right now, that'll kill her confirmation. Game over. Game over. So nationally, the whole industry is watching to see who's ultimately going to be in charge, the people's regulators or the utilities. So I guess really just that's the big picture. What we need to do is put a bright white spotlight on the committee, on the members of the committee, and hold them, make sure that they understand that people are watching and that we know that if they vote against her, a vote against her is a vote against the ratepayers. You know, some of the talking points, 4 main talking points, real quick, you know, first thing you want to do is, first let me just say that Terry put a phenomenal newsletter, you know, alert out that's got all of the links to where you can simply click on and submit your testimony or sign up to testify with some information. You know, it's a terrific all-in-one place. One's for the executive nominations, one's for the energy and technology, and one's for the environment committees. It's all there. So all you have to go to do is on that, go to the executive nominations committee and click on submit testimony. You've done that before. I think Terry did a whole good piece on that. And you just want to basically say that you need them to vote yes for Melissa Gillette. She's seen as a national model and a true champion for the people of Connecticut. That's why the utilities are working so hard to unseat her. And a vote against Marissa Gillette is a vote for the utilities over people. And finally, urge the committee to vote for what's best for their constituents and confirm her nomination. So that said, I think also there's the letter, the sign-on letter that Terry has up there as well that people can sign on to. And you can use comments from her letter also to, you know, to put your own little quick notes to the committees. We do, as Terry said, we do have CTLCV has a much sort of extensive watch list of everything that we're tracking. And so many of those, I think most all of them that are on that list right now have all been raised and are all going to have public hearings over the next, you know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks tops. And so I'll stop there. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them at the end.
Thank you so much, Lori. Yes, Marissa Gillette, I think her reappointment is like really critical. There are so many things that we care about in terms of climate and energy that wind up passing through PURA. And if we have someone who is not in that position, who does not put the ratepayers and the people of Connecticut first, we are going to be in real trouble in terms of making progress on good energy policy. And so some of you may be wondering, how come we haven't talked about the climate bill or the climate resiliency bill? And these bills that we're talking about now they're out and they have public hearings, so we wanted to focus on them. We are going to talk a little bit where we will talk about the climate bill and the climate resiliency bill sort of at the end, but I don't think we have all the language yet, and we haven't all seen it. So that's why we haven't like highlighted it tonight, but we will talk about it. So I'm going to have Sam. Come on, Sam. Hello, Sam. And Sam, like, she's going to talk about, Sam, honestly, you can hit whatever bills you want to talk about, but she's specifically also going to make sure she talks about the municipal aggregation bill and the thermal network bill that are in front of the Energy and Technology Committee.
All right, terrific. Well, I'll kick off because I think we'll probably get to these bills that we don't have language for yet. The climate piece of this conversation. I'm sure it hasn't gotten by all of you that in the past year, Connecticut has really seen an uptick in climate change impacts between devastating flooding, the fires of the fall, a really pretty long heat wave during the summer. These are all things that we're going to see more and more and more and more. This is really just the beginning. We're not prepared for it, and we're not doing enough to mitigate it. At the federal level, it's nothing short of a disaster in terms of taking action for climate change. So action at the states and local levels is really more important than ever, but we can't take it for granted because even our own legislature has not really done anything meaningful on climate in the last 2 years. And the governor has been really turning his back on some of the promises that he has made. So we have our work cut out for us. And we're going to need to watch every one of these bills and make sure they're not being weakened, make sure, protect them from greenwashing, because there are lobbyists all over the Capitol from the oil and gas industry, trying to sneak in incentives for themselves in these bills. They're attacking energy efficiency and renewable energy programs, as we've discussed. So we're going to have to really fight for these bills to be strong, and back away from them if they're not. It's really the only way to win. So a couple that are out that I wanted to talk about, are in the Energy and Technology Committee, where we see a lot of renewable energy bills typically. There is a hearing coming up on Tuesday with a number of bills on the agenda, but two of note we think would really help accelerate our renewable energy future, which we absolutely need. We have to stop digging the hole of fossil fuels and have more and more renewables make up our electricity supply, our transportation, and the way we heat our buildings. And so the two bills are one for community choice aggregation. This is a way to purchase electricity through that municipalities could purchase electricity for the entire municipality and choose a supplier that is 100% renewable, and get a better rate than folks in their town see right now through the standard service. We know that this type of program is in place in many other states, including New Hampshire has a really strong program, and New York. In Massachusetts, where they have allowed this, the city of Boston went out to bid for electricity for the entire city and did 100% renewable buy. It was cheaper than the standard service. And so, you know, there's real promise in that legislation. And Terry, maybe you can drop the bill number in the chat. That would be great. And another bill on the agenda among the 10 or so that are on the agenda for Tuesday is one on thermal energy networks. Thermal energy networks is a way to do heating and cooling at a community scale, rather than house by house or apartment by apartment, because heating is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. So heating in Connecticut, because most of us have furnaces burning oil or gas in our basements. Heating alone in residential and commercial buildings makes up 30% of all the greenhouse gas emissions in our state. And it also makes up 23% of all the NOx emissions, health-harming NOx emissions. That's more than 8 times the number of power plants combined. In order to address this, we have to move off of combustion as the way we heat. And thermal energy networks, you know, heat pumps are how you do it on an individual basis, but thermal energy networks are they're various, they can come in various types, but basically it pulls together a whole bunch of buildings. It can be businesses and municipal buildings as well as households to all share in the same, often ground source heat pumps, but beyond a networked loop. And it's 6 times more efficient than a gas furnace to do it this way. It doesn't leave people behind since every house gets on the loop, whether you're low income or a renter, the building you're in would still be on there. 8 other states have established thermal energy networks. And very notably, there's been a big project in Framingham, Massachusetts that has connected 154 different customers across 30 plus buildings in a 1-mile loop there. It's really the future and what we need to be doing. So it's exciting that there's a bill. It could use some improvement, but it definitely needs support from folks. I think we'll be able to, we have some of the experts coming in to suggest improvements, but if folks can come and support it as a something we can launch in Connecticut, that would be terrific. And one other bill I wanted to note, it's one of these bills that we don't have language on yet, but I think it's important for people to know it's out there, is that the Environment Committee has introduced a Climate Superfund bill. This is, if you've been watching the news, there have been bills passed in New York and Vermont that basically make the polluters pay for what is happening with climate. And, you know, much like the Superfund bill cleaning up, environmental, hazards, this provides a large pot of funding to come in and deal with what we need to deal with. We know climate inaction is way more costly, but cleaning up disasters and mitigating climate change, you know, it's not inexpensive, and the polluters should be helping pay for it. And I'll stop there. And before we go on, Terry, to the other bills, I will drop in the chat some links, including, you know, messages you can send to lawmakers around climate, signing a petition that we're trying to get thousands of signatures on to deliver to the legislature. And also mark your calendars for March 7th, where we'll have a climate lobby day.
Thank you so much, Sam. I'd also want to let you know IREJN is doing our second annual legislative prayer breakfast on Wednesday, March 12th. So mark your calendars for that as well. Now I'd like to have Amy Patterson from the Connecticut Land Conservation Council talk about nature-based solutions.
Thanks, Terry, and thanks, everybody. Not only my co-panelists here, but for all of you joining us tonight. So again, I'm Amy Patterson, I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council. We are the umbrella organization for Connecticut's 117 or so land trusts, and our mission is to elevate and strengthen land conservation in the state, and our annual conservation priorities reflect that mission. We focus on land conservation, land protection, and prioritization of nature-based solutions. So what are nature-based solutions? It's almost self-explanatory. It's finding solutions to environmental and societal issues through nature. Forest lands, trees, wetlands, healthy organic soils, riparian buffers, and other natural ecosystems are among our most potent defenses against the impacts of climate change, and they help to reduce the loss of biodiversity, which is like climate, is a worldwide crisis. And in Connecticut, it's no different. Nature-based solutions, of course, provide other myriad benefits for the public, the economy, the environment, reducing the risks of flooding, filtering pollutants from the air, keeping our water clean. And again, they are natural. This is nature, and that's what's, you know, what I talk to land trusts, I say, keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to help you do that because you are providing nature-based solutions. But they can also include green infrastructure like living shorelines and rain gardens. They're efficient, they're cost-effective, and the data is compelling on their efficacy. Experts have estimated that nature-based solutions can contribute 20 to 37% to keeping temperature increases below 2 degrees centigrade. And if you're following the sad news, you'll know that we have passed that threshold, at least temporarily we did in 2024, which is highly disturbing, particularly in light of the rollbacks that are going on at the federal level. For forests and trees in Connecticut, nature-based solutions absorb about 7% or 3 million tons of the 47 million metric tons of carbon pollution released into the atmosphere annually. CLCC is very active at the Capitol. We have supported many bills already this session, and will support many of the bills that have been discussed this evening. We are awaiting HB 5004, which is the large climate omnibus bill. I'm not sure what they're going to entitle it, but we're waiting to see that language. But we do know, as it did last year, it will include a provision on nature-based solutions, specifically to prioritize and elevate nature-based solutions as a whole of government approach in policy. And that is critically important. Many states in New England and across the country are doing that. And it is critical. And as Kim had said, you know, we need to make sure that we are codifying these protections as much as possible. You know, administrations come and go. And while there might be programs now that are emphasizing nature-based solutions in some way, shape, or form, the next administration might come in and change that. So we want to try and codify nature-based solutions as a priority in state policy all across the board. And as Terry had also alluded to, there is a governor's bill, SB 9, that we are awaiting language on as well, that should, if it follows last year's language, include nature-based solutions in there as well, which is very exciting. And then lastly, I'll just say that as part of our agenda also, conservation funding is very, very important. The governor just released his biennial budget, and there are many conservation programs in there that we look to make sure are funded. And unfortunately, the open space grant program, which land trusts rely upon, as well as municipalities and water companies, was not recommended for funding for the next 2 years. We are working on that to have it restored. And then there are other sources of funding that we're monitoring, both in the budget and the bond authorizations, which will come up in a separate bill as an implementer. So that's where I'll stop. But nature-based solutions, it's something that we all need, and we need to be emphasizing it across the board in everything that we do. So thanks, Terry, for the opportunity here, and thanks to you all again for coming. And support your local land trust. There's almost one in every town. And if you don't know where your land trust is, I'll tell you. I'm going to put the link in the chat.
Thank you so much, Amy. Yes, certainly as a faith-based environmental organization, I feel like our group really understands the importance of nature as a source of hope and strength, and also a solution to some of our biggest crises. So I'm very curious. I'm waiting with bated breath to see these two bills. And so I wanted to see if Lori and Sam, I think we can kind of go into Q&A, but I want to see if Lori and Sam want to talk at all about the climate energy pieces that we might be seeing with 5004 and SB 11. See if they are. Yeah, Sam's here. All right. I always wonder if people like run away and get a glass of water or something. Anyway, so do you want to talk about sort of what we might see, or do we want to wait for another webinar?
Might be better to wait, but I mean, just, and of course we could talk forever about these. They're huge bills, but a key focus really is going to be energy efficiency, and coupled with like water heat pump water heaters, and a lot of things that came from before, but I guess we don't really know exactly. But I know that there was a lot of talk about that in particular as a main focus and driver, particularly right now, something that would help immediately and bring people's emissions and costs down right away is just common sense. So we'll see if our legislature has any common sense this year.
Let us hope.
Oh, could I say one thing about submitting testimony? Because a lot of people have been making this mistake. There are people, when they submit testimony for the first time, where they're not sure if they're opposed or supporting testimony, you're either supporting or opposing the bill. You're not weighing in on whether you support or oppose the issue. And a lot of people, like if they see, fracking or something, or pesticides, they're like oppose. And what you're saying is you're opposing the bill when you click that. So I've seen a lot of people do that from a lot of different, new voices. So just be careful when you're hitting the support or oppose button, and it's the bill itself.
Yes, and Nancy actually had a good question in the chat saying, when contacting legislators, is it effective or okay to mention several bills at the same time that are currently being discussed in committee, or does each bill require a separate communication? I would say when you're submitting written testimony, probably it's best to submit individual statements for each bill, because of what Lori just said, in that it's you choose support or oppose. And I think it's actually cleaner and easier for them to find when they're looking is if you have a statement for each bill. The other thing is that if it gets out of committee and we're psyched, then other legislators are going to look at the testimony from the committee hearings. Especially your legislator may look and say, oh, did I have anyone from my town? What did they say? And so it's just easier if each bill, I think, has individual comments to it rather than a statement with 3 or 4 bills in it. Lori, is that basically the way you think?
Yeah, that's what I said in the I had
in your response, right?
but yeah, but when you're doing testimony or you're calling them up or whatever, you do want to kind of keep them focused. You don't want to rattle off a whole lot of bills, but it's okay to talk about more than one if you're in a communication or if you're testifying in person.
Sure. Great. Awesome. Let's see here. Any other questions in? Oh, Kim said when you submit testimony, send it to your legislators too. Yes, that's very
Yep.
wise. Great. And so does anyone, there any other questions? Anything that we should be highlighting tonight from even for my panelists that we're missing? I know we covered so much in 1 hour. That's actually in I feel like that's a record of legislation that we just covered. If you told me we were going to get through like 12 bills, I would have said no. Not possible. Let me see what's going else on in the chat. Do anything. So just to reiterate, the energy and the energy and technology committee hearing is Tuesday. I believe it starts at 11. And just for those who remember this from my effective advocacy webinar, the deadline to sign up to speak is 3 p.m. the day before. I think the deadline, actually, I said earlier, was, I think it's 5 p.m. actually to submit testimony. Am I right?
I think different committees handle it
It
differently,
depends,
to be
okay.
honest. You know,
But
it's
to
kind
sign
of,
up to actually testify is 3 p.m. the day before. And then by that evening, the day before, they will put out a list of the speaker order. The first speakers are always the agency officials and legislators, and that can go on for a while. If it's Commissioner Katie Dykes, they may have several questions for her. She's considered an expert, so she could speak for quite some time. So the first, group of officials can take a couple hours. Then they get to the general public and the advocates and the lobbyists, and those people, you start with a 3-minute statement. They may extend it if they have questions for you. But it does move on a bit faster. However, it is a completely lottery-based selection, so you don't know when you're going to go, and you also, it's not like a time is next to your name. You're just, you just are either, you could be number 15, you could be number 78, you could be number 200. In-person testimony always packs a lot of punch, but if you can't be there in person for a variety of reasons, Zoom is also possible, and is still very effective, and it does give you an opportunity to make dinner and check homework and stuff like that while you're waiting for your turn to speak. They will cut you off after 3 minutes, so try to write out your statement, time yourself to make sure you get in exactly what you want to say, and hope that they ask you questions if you want to follow up with anything. So energy and technology is Tuesday, environment is Wednesday, executive and legislative nominations is Thursday of this week. So those are the public hearings happening this week. It's going to be a very busy time. Let's see here, does anyone?
and lobby days on Wednesday for the toxics,
Yes,
and a press
lobby.
conference by the governor on Tuesday for the nomination.
Okay.
So we'll see what
He's
happens
doing a
there.
press conference on Tuesday?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, see what happens.
Hey, Lori,
Great.
you might want to put in the chat the link to your briefing papers, because so many of these issues are outlined really nicely in those separate papers on your website. If you want to put that in the chat, I think it'd be helpful.
If I can get back to it, but it sounds like we're about to end here. So before I dig that up, maybe I could give it to you, Terry. Do you do
Yeah,
follow?
absolutely.
Let me give it to
Absolutely.
Terry.
And I
she can
also,
give it-
I linked a bunch of obviously I don't have nearly the extensive list that Lori does at the Connecticut League, but I have some of those briefing papers linked on IREJN's website. So I'll continue to, I still have to add a few more bills and whatnot, but I've definitely got information up there for you as well. Thank you, Lady Erica. She said, this has been amazing. Thank you for all the work everyone has been and continues to put in. I am inspired and empowered. Good. Glad. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really grateful for all of you for joining us. And honestly, thank you so much to my fellow environmental advocates for being able to do this, especially on such short notice. We were supposed to do this on Tuesday and I moved it to Sunday. And I'm just so grateful that everyone was able to join me on a holiday weekend.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks for everybody for coming.
Thank
Awesome,
you.
guys.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Terry. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much.